Right, this is new OBS, new connections. I remember doing stuff like this. I'm sure we were doing some sort of streaming. Okay, right, yes, CodeZone. Oh, I have to press this button, don't I? I think CodeZone is back. And yes, welcome back. I'm a bit rusty. It's been a bit of time. I've had a summer hiatus, a small break, before continuing on with our coding adventure. And I was thinking, should we really be thinking this is season 3 and take on some new project? But the answer is no. Oh, look at that. We've got a virus and threat protection. Windows Defender did not find any threats. Well, that's nice. Thank you very much. What is this? Well, this is a bit of a precursory stream before we get going on with OLC CodeZone in proper. It's as usual, Twitch says my upload is unstable. I don't think that's the case. I think it's coming through just fine. So in the chat we've got Magetsup. I'm not expecting very many people because I've absolutely told nobody that this is happening. It was a bit of a spur of the moment thing. I had a very nice stream on Sunday. Thank you very much for all those that joined in on the Discord stream. That was quite entertaining. I thought I might do a few more of those. So we've got Josh Undefined. Is that the Josh we all know, or is that you, Josh? I don't recognise Josh Undefined. Is that a new name? Sorry if I sound horribly like I've completely forgotten everybody. Don't recognise. Anyway, hello. Yes, we've got Fluff. Fluff is here. Morris is here. Morris is asking, wouldn't it be great to try and pull off the Alcatraz escape? I have never successfully pulled off the Alcatraz escape. I don't know why. It's just too fiddly for my clumsy fat hands. Well, Josh Undefined. I haven't streamed in a while, Josh. I mean, it's not your fault. It's it's entirely mine. We've not had the opportunity to converse as much as we've had. Zio Zen. I was coincidentally on Twitch when it said you were starting a stream. Excellent, good. First time chat from Zio Zen there. Yeah, I don't think it's possible by mere mortals to pull off the Alcatraz escape. We are, of course, talking about Super Metroid speedrunning. Alex is here. Congratulations. Well done, Alex. Right. What are we going to be doing tonight? Well, I thought, as a bit of an introduction to what we're going to be doing over the next few weeks, I have not abandoned the editor. People think, oh, you get so far and then you give up. Actually, we're going to carry on building the editor. But I thought tonight it would be a good opportunity to look at a sort of secondary prototype editor that I made for my Jam entry and sort of have a look at its features. You could only really sort of play with the editor if you were skilled enough to beat the game. Let's hang on, we've got a few more people saying hello. Sunset, hello, yes. Yes, we're back. We're sort of getting warmed up again. It's the long, dark nights now in the UK. We've got nothing to do other than sit around until we fall asleep, and we only get to do that so many times before we die. So I thought we best make the most we can of our time. Channel evening, hello. Yes, what are we talking about? We're talking about the code. We did a code jam in the summer, and I'm putting a video together of some of the entries that I thought were a little bit amusing, and that'll be hopefully a YouTube video before the end of the year. But I wanted to talk rather selfishly about my entry. I'm going to be, put it out there. It's my stuff we're going to be looking at tonight. And if you didn't see what I submitted, a quick look here. I'm playing it in the browser on the itch site. Hopefully we'll get some audio too. It was called Don't Run Out of Shields, and it was basically like a graviton-based game. Morris knows the name of this. What was the proper name of these games? Thrust, that sort of thing. It's all very similar kind of feel. And the idea is obviously we've got this nice sound going on in the background. You controlled this spaceship, and the environment was sort of very polygonal. You had to discover these energy orbs, and by exploring this land. Now, the camera was split up into these sort of static zones. You can go and play this, of course. And I experimented with a few little graphical techniques. So let's just see, you've got obviously the nothing like it's splashing down here, but you could go behind the water and it gave you sort of an opacity effect. Anyway, let's go and explore the land a little bit here. And as you're sort of piloting around the map, you see there's different models and things. It was all a bit of a throw together. The game was secondary to what I really spent my time in the jam doing, which was building an editor. I really like the lighting in this part of the level. I was very pleased when that came off. Now let's go and find our first energy orb, because that unlocks a few things. Oh, yeah, don't hit the sides. You see the little bits of debris that fell off. It's a full physics debris as well. It's quite nice. Right, there's an energy orb. So that's given us at least some shields. Right, we need to get another energy orb to unlock some weapons. At least now we can hit the sides a couple of times at least before we explode. See, the particles bounce around on the map. It's quite nice. Now, we don't have a weapon just yet. We need to go and get another energy orb before we can get a weapon. And so I deliberately kind of make it difficult here. I was trying to exercise my game design muscles by making the player follow a path which would teach them what they needed to know before carrying on. There's a few glitches and a few bugs. Like I say, I actually put the game together, the actual game part of it, in about a day. Most of the time was spent building the prototype editor, which is actually built into the game itself. And if you complete this, you get to play with it. Let's go and just collect that orb. There we go. So now, with 2 energy orbs, I've got weapons. Let's go and get some health. Oh, good. So you can see there's some degree of physics going on with the things going on in the scenery. And we'll go down here and we'll just go and zap a few bad guys. Now, some people did actually complain it's too hard, this game. It actually isn't very hard at all. I don't feel it's very hard, and I think the record for finishing it's now about 7 minutes, something like that, so I don't think it's too bad. So you can see there's a little bit of a glitch with bullets going through the scenery, and we'll talk about some of the glitches, because I'm going to do a little sort of impromptu code review of what was going on here. Oh, dunk, 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 dunk. Right, to kill anything, you just sort of have to button spam it, right? Don't worry too much about being precise, just look where the bullets are coming from and aim in that general direction. That's why it's not a very hard game, really. Yeah, just make sure you collect some health periodically. There we go. And I tried to sort of have different zones. This is clearly an icy-like world. Here, or at least that's what I wanted it to feel like. And here we've got an underwater world. If we go this way, we can go and find like a little hidden area. You need to find this hidden area to beat the game. I will catch up with the chats in just a minute. It's a bit difficult to play this and look at the chats. So let's go down into this darker area. And so I was quite curious about how I could sort of express light and dark in the game too. I'll collect these 2 energy orbs. So underwater, you can see in this area there isn't sort of a watery sheen. It's a bit of a hack, but here everything's a little bit murkier. To just give that false impression that you are indeed going underwater. I'm not going to attempt to beat this tonight. I just thought we'll have a look into some different areas. So all the enemies respawn each time. That's to make you think about actually using health as a resource. Now this area was designed to sort of be a bit of a dark pit, and then things get hot. That's what I want it to feel like. And that was also, it gets very dangerous in this area. There's lots of bad guys around here. But again, experimenting with how do I make it feel like it's getting really hot. And the trick is sort of gradient lighting all over the place in a 2D sense. And over this way we get sort of darker and organic, and things get a bit mysterious and really dark and shadowy as we go towards the left. I'm going to die very soon. You can tell I've not practiced it. And there we go, the brilliant ending. It just tells you to get good. Now, if you successfully complete the game, you get access to the editor. And I think it's the editor that I really wanted to show tonight. All right, let me just have a quick glance at some of these chats. Lunar Lander, that was the word I was looking for. First physics game, yes. Did you use Soundwave Engine, or did you break down and use my MIDI? No, I use So Loud. You can't beat So Loud. Sorry, Morris. I know we're on the same team, but So Loud's just good. Water could have used some buoyancy. It could have done, but as I said, I built the game in one day. I keep failing in the game because escape wasn't the pause menu. Yeah, there wasn't a pause menu. There is no way to pause. You just have to park the ship carefully. Didn't know there was health power-ups you could get as you went. Well, you didn't experiment then, did you? It's, not blaming. Anyway, let's close this rubbish off and let's have a look at it. Now, of course, it was built in my Pixel game engine. It didn't actually use anything special. It used Pixel Game Engine 2, which is the one we've all got access to. But I did use some of my new PGE3 stuff on top. Now, those that have been following along over the last few weeks, I've not just been asleep for about 2 months. I have actually been working pretty hard on doing some Pixel Game Engine 3 stuff. Texturing is actually part of the thing, and we will see that there are some textures later on. So it's not void of texture. But I thought it would be useful, maybe a little bit specific, but let's have a look at some of the code that went into creating this game. And it's a nice little sort of look into how my mind works when I'm actually sort of building these things. So we had 9 days in total. Most people think I cheat by doing all of mine and then just spending 9 days tweaking it. Actually, I legitimately did just start 9 days in advance. Now, I've already got libraries and tools and things ready to go, so it wasn't a complete start from scratch, but certainly the idea to build the editor in the game engine and then build the game and get it out there was. Now, the nice thing, of course, it's Pixel Game Engine. It's compilable straight into Inscripton, mostly provided by Maurice Danderstein and the guys on the Discord server. And, oh, hang on, I've just got a ping on Discord. Let me just make sure. Okay, we'll worry about that later. So let's have a look. So this is the starting point. This is the entry point for the game. This is how I construct little games like this. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the best way, but it's the way I went about solving this problem. Now, if you don't know anything about the Pixel Game Engine, it is completely self-contained rendering and input sort of framework. I've no problems calling it an engine. Some people get really upset when you call it an engine. But the idea is you inherit from it and you create a class. And in this case, I have a class called Run Game, which is the main game, because the theme of the jam was run. And I construct the size of the window I want and specify some flags. So in this case, I wanted it to VSync and whatever else it does. I think it was using filtered textures in this instance, just to make things a little bit smoother around the edges. And then you start the game if you can successfully construct the engine. I know it seems very basic, some of the stuff we're looking at, but we're going to very quickly jump into the weeds on some of this. Right, so Run Game was game main. Here it is. So you can see it including from the Pixel Game Engine. And this doesn't actually have very much in it. You see, the fundamental game is a bit sort of variable light because it defers everything to a little state machine. Now, this is a state machine pattern that I developed a couple of jams ago, and I've stuck with it. And I know that a few people that have used it have also stuck with it because it's very simple to implement. You don't need any special libraries or anything to do, but it just works quite nicely. It can't be an engine because game engine projects never reach version 1. That's very true. We're on 2.30. Yeah, Morris, the only reason is I've not used the mini audio library yet. I use SoLoud because I've got code and things ready to go for another audio project that I'm working on. It just works nicely with how I've got things set up. So for me to actually pull it into the game was literally 30 minutes to get it all set up and established, and off I go. So in jam conditions, I was against the clock a bit. But you know what? I'm going to throw Morris a bone here. Right? I'm told it is a very good audio library. Go and use it if you're doing Pixel Game Engine stuff. I think it's probably time to start retiring the Pixel Game Engine sound extension or utility, whatever it was, because it's just not very good anymore. So I don't want people sort of falsely thinking that's the way to do stuff. I'd rather they go and use for sound. It's just one of those things we've never managed to do a very good job of keeping encapsulated. It's too fragmented across different platforms about how to go about implementing sound. So I don't think you can do it without needing some third-party assistance. Well, you can, but you can't do it well. So exactly, yeah. Right, so what have we got here? One of my extensions is splash screen. If you just have this line somewhere in your header, it will put that nice fancy splash screen at the start. If I click play, we'll just let that build in the background. And if we don't have that line, it doesn't put the splash screen on. So that's a nice little feature there. In fact, there we go. So this is the splash screen. That's completely self-contained. If I compile it without that, it goes into... straight into what we want it to go into. Now you can see I've already configured it here to go straight into what was my editor. We can have a look at the editor in a minute, but let's just come back to finishing off what we've got here. So I work like this. The bit that matters is I have a class or a struct called game assets, and that's really just one massive, great big global variable. And I've no problem with that. I think that's a completely acceptable solution in firstly jam conditions, but also for games. It works well, and we'll have a look why is it a good solution when we have a look at its guts in a minute. Then I have an unordered map of modes, and these game modes are the states. So different parts of my game reside in different sort of self-contained little class units, and this is what's linking the names, which we'll see how that works too in a minute. So if I go into my main game here, you'll see there's actually not very much to it. Forget all of this. All of this down here, would you believe, was actually a prototype that I started building on the very first couple of hours of the jam. I wanted a little person walking around this map, and I was using inverse kinematics and all sorts. I just wasn't going to get that done on time. When would you say global variables are not okay? They are, well, they're an established anti-pattern. If the trouble is not necessarily a global variable in a simple project. If you have something that's 100 files with 10 layers of abstraction going on, you don't really know what's changing your global variables at any given time. So you can't then rely on a function to do something without mutating the rest of the program. You should be able to call a function and it just work. It does, and you should be able to completely understand what its output and how it sort of mutates the rest of the program. How does it change things? It should be thoroughly understood. And global variables give the developer an opportunity to break that rule. That you could go and call this function. It goes and modifies some global variable, and so your program state is different the next time that function is called. That could be a bit fiddly. Side effects. There we go. Morris has got a better word for them. Oh, Alter. Hello. Yeah, sorry, I missed you jumping in there. So on my onUserCreate function here, I have where I'm establishing my map. I have these different states. Invalid mode is just some default state, just in case nothing links to it. I have my loading screen, level creation, which is the editor, level playing, which happens to be the game, the introduction, which is a sequence of menus, and the end game screen, which is where you saw it said git good. I go away and I create all of those things at the start of my program. So onUserCreate is called right at the very start, and I go and create these. And I pass into them a reference to my big global variable. Now, I think this is an acceptable use of this big global variable because I'm actually using it to transfer information from one class to the next. I know that definitely it is the case that there are going to be side effects. The loading screen is going to populate my global variable with useful stuff. The level creation is going to change the sizes and dimensions of the level, which is stored in my global variable. So I'm okay with that in this instance. I'm the designer, and ultimately nobody else is using this code, but I don't think it's necessarily an anti-pattern. It works quite well. And so here I go and call what you'll see in my states in a minute, this onCreate function, which allows me to go and then basically call the onUserCreate for each of these states. The states can go and sort themselves out. And I go and specify what's my first screen. Now with a state machine, you always want two variables, now and next. That's important. You don't change the state when you're in the middle of another state. On my onUserUpdate function, which in Pixel Game Engine terms is called every single frame, I just make sure, have I changed state? If I have, exit one, change the state, and enter the new one. Otherwise, go and call the onUpdate function of this current state. And this is a really nice pattern, because when a state signals that it wants to change, It does so by returning from its update function the new state. It does mean the states have to have an awareness of each other. That's okay. They do, because the states are just stored in my big global variable. They might not necessarily know a history of the state, so it makes nesting things a little bit tricky. But in very simple situations where you're just moving from one state to the next, it works really nicely. Very simple, very elegant, and allows me to sort of compartmentalize the code nicely. It's a great explanation of potential drawbacks. Helps me understand the possibility. Thank you, Arthur. Oh, here's a name I cannot pronounce. Trick. Oh, hang on. This is Xbox speak for nitric, isn't it? There we go. Wow, I finally caught the legend. Well, you're thoroughly disappointed in a minute. Eccentrics. Eccentrics. Oh, see, so I'm just not cool. So that's the basic game. I should see, well, where's the game? We've still not got to that. Let's have a look at this big global variable. What's actually going in? Okay, so to just annoy Morris even further, we'll see the first thing is my game thing, yes, is a, yeah, excuse that for a second, is a great big global. Now, there you have it, exactly. It's a big global variable. So let's have a look what's inside this. Why have I got the audio loaded here? Basically, it's because almost everything has access to this big global variable, so it makes it a convenient place to put some common header files. But I also need the types ready to start storing the sound data. I'm just going to zoom out just a little bit so we can see what's going on. Here are my states. It's an enum class. There's nothing tied to them. It's just a convenient way of labeling them. I store all of my graphics data here. What I actually do is I have a path. I store the string and then renderable. So in Pixel Game Engine speak, that's the thing that stores the graphic. For the sound, I have another map, which is exactly the same. I have the name of the sound, and I store a pointer to that particular sound to play. We have another class called World we'll have a look at soon, and these are just some of the game state things. What was the result? I.e., did you die out, or did you finish the game? Did you finish the game and collect some of the hidden items? All that sort of thing. What was the result? When we go into the results stage, it can interrogate this and say, well, that's what happened. And time taken as well. So for the speedrunners, it does actually yield the time. Yeah, this could be adapted, this model, to include some sort of history. It does get a little bit spaghetti when you start to add a history to it. But I have a variant of this where Morris has said here you can push and pop like a stack. There are pros and cons against doing that with a sort of a state machine-esque way anyway. That's for another time. It is possible. It's not necessarily the best model to try and squeeze into this approach. Are microcontroller codes a good place for global variables? Well, ultimately, let's be honest, everything's a global variable. It's purely a construct we inflict upon ourselves. So microcontroller or PC CPU, it's just memory. So when we get down into the semantics of it all. Right, so as you can see, my global variable basically has all the graphics and all the sound. Now, that's one of the reasons why this might not be a good approach. What if you've got loads of resources? You've got lots of stuff to load right at the start. And that's okay. I was happy. I knew I didn't have very much to load in this instance. It's fine for small-scale projects. Nothing wrong with loading everything in. It just means everything is loaded once, and it's there when you need it. But I actually have a loading screen. If you don't know if you noticed that, if I click run the application again, let the splash screen play out. The first thing it does is goes and loads the resources. Now that's quite useful, particularly when you know you're going to be targeting sort of a web-based environment. You don't know how long things might take to load. It's also, the loading requires some sort of parsing. So parsing, of course, relies on some local CPU activity. Again, you want to sort of show the user something's happening, even if it's not very interesting. So we'll go and have a quick look at the loading screen. I know that sounds really dry and dull, doesn't it? But it's a good example of a very simple state. So the first thing that my game does is it goes into this loading screen mode, this state. And it's got in here some vectors of strings. As you can see here, I don't think I actually used that. I can't remember if I actually used those. I think they get deferred now to the game asset thing. All of these inherit from something called game mode. So let's just have a quick look at game mode. There we go. So game mode is just some pure class, and it contains a pointer to this global variable. Yeah, the game mode doesn't actually do anything at all. Nothing at all. Just a load of stub functions, in case you didn't want to bother with onEnter and onExit functions. As we go to the loading screen, this is how I'm loading the data. So you'd think I'd defer to some external files and things. I could do all of that, but I'm not. I'm hard coding the assets for the game. I'm happy to do that. Again, there's not that many. And I actually I like this new feature in Visual Studio, by the way. I actually use this as an identifier for the graphic in runtime anyway, so that's quite a convenient thing to have. Right, so here we can see I've got my vector of assets that I'm loading just with some strings. So this is called on the onCreate function. Loads the assets. You see it's not actually doing any loading. All that's doing is placing these strings into this vector of strings, but they're discriminated by whether they're graphics or audio. I like OGG file formats for games. I just find that they're just it's just a bit more sort of indie gamey, isn't it? These OGG file formats, and basically it's anything. This is just vectors of strings, these paths. Because when I get to my loading screen, I don't want to just load everything all at once, or else I'll never see the loading screen update. So I do one thing per frame. Here I clear the screen and display the loading screen. And I go through the graphic assets first. So I update the screen with what assets currently being loaded, and then I take my big global variable, which is here. I then go to the graphics, I create a map entry, which is the name of the graphic, and I load it. And whenever I want to use that graphic anywhere now, I can reference it directly with the name that we specified up here. So if I change the file later on, I only have to change my code in one place, and the graphic will update accordingly across the whole project. A nice little convenience, particularly when you're doing jams and you're sort of still figuring things out. Exactly the same principle applies to the audio. I run through my vector of audio assets. I display to the user what I'm loading, and I go and add them to my great big global variable. And finally, I have the same for my load of the level. So the world is a custom class. We can go and have a look at that in a minute too. What actually was in the world. Now I'll get to some more practical stuff in a bit. Finally, the last thing that we do on here is go and initialize the sound engine. So that's the last thing that the loading screen does. The loading screen populates that big global variable full of useful things and says, right, go, we're done. When we've got to this stage, right now, go to level creation. Now that's what I've told it to do because we're sort of playing with the level creation side of things today. Typically that would say level playing. It would, whatever the start of the game is, introduction, something like that. If we're not ready to change state yet, we just remain in our loading screen state because that's what we return. So every frame this function is called. If we change states, that's great. If we don't, we return our current state, and the state machine at the start will go and tidy it all up for us. It's a nice way to do it. Let's just have a quick glance at some of the chats. You can make global file scope by not declaring them in header and marking them static so they're not exported. Yeah, okay. We can start getting all the C nerds coming in now. How are you doing, Tarry? It's good to see you've popped up on Twitch. Kanawanagagasaki waki. Boo. Thank you. Right. Let's run some stuff. So where were we going with all this? Just have a bit of a break and actually have a look at the editor that was involved. So yes, the CodeZone is back, and I wanted to continue this series. It's not technically season 3. We'll continue it as season 2 with the editor that we were building. Now, we were building the editor all in WX Widget, so we built lots of prototypes with lots of interesting things. And I just became more and more disenfranchised with the sort of user interface side of it. I really want to be able to have all of this sort of stuff in the game that I'm editing. I want to be able to jump from the game to the editor straight away. So to that end, I needed to start working on some in-game GUI, and that's exactly what we were doing sort of towards the beginning of summer. We started working on our own windowing system, our own GUI system, and that sort of thing. So it's a nice use of that technology that we were developing then. super busy building robots with work. Oh, that's good. That's what I do. We'll have to pit them against each other. Used very commonly where I work on VxWorks. Oh, right. So this is the editor, and what we can see here is a little bit of a cloud. Now, I'm going to spoil the game if you haven't gone and played it, because now you'll actually get to see the map in its entirety. So we're in editor mode, and I can zoom and pan things with the mouse button. What we've got on the top here is an object property windows. We'll look at that in a minute. At the bottom, we've got basically color selection. We can specify colors, and we've got a ready-made palette. So one of the first design decisions I make when I'm sort of thinking about a game is really do think about this. Limit your palette to start with. There's nothing worse than seeing some indie projects where all the colors are not quite in harmony with one another. You know, the biggest sin to commit when doing an indie project is you actually use sort of different resolution images from what you're rendering, and so all the pixels look like the different sizes. The second biggest is the palettes just not being consistent with each other. So I find actually having a really limited palette forces you to be creative, but whatever you do, you end up with something that looks a little bit consistent with itself, and I think that's quite a powerful thing. So here we can see the world as we had it before. We started off here. We've got some trees and things. And what's interesting is, of course, it's just one big flat world. Even though we had the camera sort of floating around in different zones before, it's just one big world. Now, in this window here, I've got different layers. So we can select the background layer. Is the stream everything okay? Simply because Twitch keeps saying it's all unstable, but my own telemetry says I've not dropped any frames or anything like that. It's okay? Okay, it's just Twitch being twitchy. Yeah, thank you, Magetsu. Cheers. It does, right? It comes together okay. I hope you're talking about what you're seeing on the screen anyway. Now, you can see there is some highlighting going on the screen. This is because in the background, one of the things we can do is we can change all of these the opacities of these layers, so we can look at them all in isolation. So let me just pull these ones down. So the background consists of rectangles, in this case, of different shapes and different sizes, and they have different gradient fills, and that's because that's one of the big properties of this engine. Now I can select any of these and I can move them around. See? Isn't that nice? So here I've got a grid appearing. I thought it was useful to have something that represented a single screen, and that allowed me to do sort of the single screen style rooms that you can go into. How does that work? Well, let's explain that first. I'll leave those up there for the time being. If I bring in the camera zones, so let's go down here. So there's a utility class as part of the Pixel game engine. I'll just get rid of the background for the time being. Utility class as part of the Pixel game engine called Camera 2D, and it's a nice self-contained sort of camera tracking application. In fact, there's a live demo you can play on the One Lone Coder website. We can see all the different modes of the camera. And one of the things I can do is, you see these different colours here, they're all different coloured rectangles, is I can declare that as a single region within our game. And in my camera class, I can say to the camera class, look, this is a region that your camera is not allowed to go out of. And as the spaceship transfers from, where my mouse cursor, let's say it's here, as the spaceship transfers from one to the next, it reloads that world boundary for the camera, and that allows us to have these sort of scrolling areas and static room areas, which is a great way to sort of handle some design inconsistencies between the level, but also a nice way to sort of structure the level for the player. So what I'm going to do is turn the camera zones to be a little bit transparent like that, and bring in some of these background features again. So I have a little. Why is it not sticking with the things until I click that button? It's because I've got a little problem with my GUI library. I know how to fix it. I just need to get around to it. Let's just take the camera. So let's put in the background again, and I'm going to bring in the middle layer because that's really all of the fun stuff. There we go. I'll bring in some objects. So if we start looking at how the camera zones are layered on top here now by making them a little bit more opaque. There we go. So we can see the distinct regions. Now, if you recall when I started playing the demo, we took off from this platform and we could scroll along here, but there was a transition to this upper area we could scroll along there. And so that's exactly how this was handled. It adds a very Super Metroid-esque feel. And here we can see an entire room. So the highlighting is when my mouse cursor goes over it. It's just how I like to do it. Let me select something that's going to be less intrusive, that one. So here we've got a single room. It's meant to be a big deal when you find this room because it's where you pick up your first energy orb. In fact, there it is. There is the energy orb. And these are objects in my world, which are just textured objects. So textures did exist, but I didn't need that many of them. Let's just take out that one. Take out the camera zones now, and we'll bring in some of the foreground tricks that I was using. So I wanted to give light in certain places. So this was just a polygon that was added. I don't think I had any foreground objects. I don't think I did anyway. So if this was just lighting, which I used in certain places, I also used it for the clouds up here. Right, so they're foreground objects, and the nice thing about this is that I didn't demo it before. They have translucency, so as the ship goes behind them, they become the ship becomes more and more sort of invisible. That's because in the middle here I've got like no transparency at all, and towards the edges I have. So it gave this sort of volumetric feel to the cloud. It's a nice way to think about it. I also used the foreground to sort of give overlaying sort of lighting as well. Was it foreground or was it maybe one of the others? Yeah, I'm sure it was foreground. That's foreground objects. Yeah, so if we can see here in the watery section, all I had was simply a gradiented polygon with different shades of blue going from over the top from the bottom. I will just make everything else invisible, and so we can start to see these foreground polygons, which we used to just sort of texture different areas. So I wanted this one to be hot, and you can see it sort of fades into that corner and gets more white and solid down here. And this one was a shadowy area. As you got into this corner, it got darker and darker for the player, because these lighting effects are rendered on top of the player. There's a dark, shadowy room in this case. And the water was a bit of a trick. So you could go behind the water, and it's just a transparent blue blob. So as I start to bring in the middle. So the middle layer was what I classified as the contact layer. This was the layer where all of the physics got applied. So this are the things you could come into contact with. You like the overall view of the map? Metroidvania Easy Engine. Right, well, that's kind of the plan. I mean, I don't think I'm going to end up creating sort of Metroidvanias with it, but it works nicely, right? It's just a bit of an editor. So how well does it actually work? Well, let's have a look. If I go back, and we'll bring everything back in that we know we want to be able to see. So, and we'll keep the camera zones for now clear, keep all the objects off. Okay. And if I go back to the middle, so as you can see, as I'm moving my cursor around, different parts of the world are illuminating. So there's actually not very many things. If I render the whole world is made of 526 items, which I think is great when you consider that actually it looked quite atmospheric and detailed, given its simplicity. And you can see that the polygons are not that high. Let's have a look at this one. So if I click on a polygon, see, this is actually all, by the way, using a version of the Geometry 2D extension, plus some additional maths that I've not yet ported over to that yet. We can click on a polygon, and we can select that polygon in isolation, and we can move it around. So we can very easily start to change the world. And if I press the Tab key, I can see the individual vertices of that polygon, and I can move those around too. Now, this was a fan shape, I think, so you've got to be careful about overlapping things, particularly if you've got transparency in there. But we can start to sort of edit the world. And I found this quite convenient to edit the world in real time to sort of get it to be what I wanted it to be. If I press Tab, come out of I sort of stole that from Blender, that we've got the individual polygon and the final. So this one's a bit more of a complicated polygon. If I press Tab again, you can see it consists of quite a few vertices for that polygon, and it wraps around that edge. And that just happens to align with one of those single screen areas there. So little tricks there that I couldn't quite get the colours matching up properly. Where was that? It's actually better shown down here. Don't quite get the colours matching up, but because you change from one camera zone to the next, you just don't notice. And that was okay. I thought I could live with that. The nice thing about working like this is, of course, your objects are completely independent. Let me just come out of edit mode there. I can select an object, I can go and position it somewhere else. It's a really nice way. And all of the physics and things are associated with the object. So it's just a nice, convenient way to move things about. If I select the foreground layer, is that a foreground or an object? These are objects. We'll come back to objects in a minute. If I go and select something in the foreground, such as the underwaterness, you can see it's just a coloured rectangle, nothing special at all. What's OB? Yeah, objects at the moment. There is a distinction purely because I had a time constraint. So this is not the editor I intended it to end up being, but it's an editor, and it brought together a whole raft of technologies I wanted to see if they work together, such as the GUI and the Pixel Game Engine 3 rendering engine, which is what's really powering all of this. Well, actually, that's not true. It's actually rendered in Pixel Game Engine 2, but all of this polygon stuff is Pixel Game Engine 3. So how do we go about creating? The nice thing is, can we create new stuff sort of on the fly? Well, yes, we can. So if I select the middle layer and I select a color, for example, I can press T, which is what we've been doing in for the rest of the year. Really, we've created a new thing in the middle of our object, in the middle of our layer. If I press F, that allowed me to do a fan style shape like this, and right click to finish. And if I press S, this gives you a strip style shape. Now, you may recall that we actually went to town with Lua and everything else to go and create all of these fancy objects, splines and bendy pipes and curves and all. I've just not brought those in. It's not been wasted time or wasted effort. There's no Lua anything going on here. I got away with just having these basic 3 objects. And if I select them, we can start to see them. For some reason, when I select the strip objects, you actually get to see a lot more of the geometry. That's a byproduct of how OpenGL handles some of the rendering here. And I think I've started to sketch some ideas out. That might become a video. Why is that the case? Because there's actually some interesting reasons for it, but I'm not get stuck into that right now. But just to prove that this is all live again, you can press Tab and you can edit the geometry. And this is immediately live. So at any point, I think I can press Q. Let's come out of edit mode. If I press Q, there we go, Q, I can bring up sort of a live action camera thing. Now this red ball has physics, as in it can collide with this middle layer, but it doesn't necessarily obey the rest of the game rules. So we can see here, these are the objects I've just created, and they are in fact live. Look, see, my ball can't get through these objects. It is live in the game engine. I've got this nice graph paper going on in the background too. Slopes and things will be handled like slopes by the physics engine that gets implemented later on. And if I press Q, I can come out of there. Oh, you saw it actually obeying the camera zones as well, doesn't it? Look, see, yeah, it goes. That's the transition zone there. And if we go down, I think if I hold down Shift, does it go slow? It goes slower. So this is as fast as I made it go. Let's go back down into this area. You can see it was a nice vertical scroll, and then we go into different camera zones. How does that for us? Oh, Starfreak. Hello. Oh, Savage Banana Soup. I don't recognise that name either. Starfreak, very good to see you. Yeah. A bit of time here. I know, it's good stuff. Hopefully we're getting back into the swing of things with CodeZone. So I've had a bit of a summer hiatus just generally from OLC. Hopefully you might have noticed the new logo in the bottom corner of the stream. Having a bit of a refresh of the old stuff. Anyway, come out of it. So we can at any time we can sort of dip in and see if the geometry works. That sphere, by the way, approximately represents the spaceship in terms of size. So I could sort of before start playing fine tune some of the tighter gaps and things. Right. At any point we can move these objects around. I can't move them from layer to layer, and I don't have copy and paste feature. I don't have a lot of usability features. One of the things I can do though is press the P key, and you can see it brings up another little sphere. And this allows me to select a color and paint vertices. Look at that. Which then allowed me to exploit the nature of the geometry in different ways. So if I had this sort of green here, and I just wanted to sort of accent it a little bit with some light, I could do, right? Just to give it a bit of an edge. And that made me that's what caused me to think about how do you actually construct the geometry to give it some life. One of the things, maybe it's a bit difficult to see as we start getting things a bit more chaotic, is this greenery here, but there's actually a shadowed area underneath this overhang, for example. This is just me playing around. It took a day to construct this level, and it was a lot of fun doing it. Particularly because the tools kept crashing and it kept crashing out on me, so I was saving a lot. It's all very, very unstable at the moment. And I think if I press these, I can change the brush size. If I wanted to do sort of larger sweeps, so let's say I wanted to change a whole section of level from something to something else, I can sort of spray paint the whole level, which I thought was very useful for doing sort of quick feel hacks and fixes and just getting it to be right. It looks like the line between. Yeah, that's right. You are right. That's exactly what's happening. So it's going from the final vertex to the first vertex. But this is what happens when you throw this data structure at OpenGL raw. And it's interesting that it decides to do that last particular one, because it's not actually a looped piece of geometry. I'm not sure why it does it. It's a bit frustrating, and I've since upgraded PG3 with some better drawing routines to handle that. So geometry should look a little bit more like geometry. Right, so the last part of this editor really is as you can see, there's things called objects. So let's select these are on the background. So in an object layer, and right now I really make a distinction based on the evenness or oddness of the layer index, which is, you can full on jam mode here. There isn't sort of any specialist stuff. It just looks and says, is it an odd number, then it's likely to be an object layer. Hopefully you're able to see what those compile throughput issues were. Not yet, no, but thank you for the tip. I've not actually delved into why that's the case yet. So SFC, though, was helping me out. One of the reasons the editor project started to stall a bit was the compile times on stream were getting a bit long. And I think that was a combination of A, my computer being, well, now 11, 12 years old, B, WX widgets being 30 years old and trying clumsily to move into templates and not doing a very good job of it. C, the reliance on Sol, which is entirely templated. D, the reliance of PG3 Prototype 2, which is entirely templated. And there was a common theme here that all of these templates were just absolutely maxing out my compile times. It was just really becoming unfun. I don't work well when my compile times are slow. I like to do a quick change and immediately see what the results are. If I get very frustrated and dissatisfied if that's not the case. So SFC happened to put me in the direction of plus OBS running and all of the other things. So it put me in the direction of some additional tooling built inside of Visual Studio. Not quite built inside, because I've sort of sold it as, oh yeah, you just go and have a look at build insights. It was like almost a 1 gig download of stuff to install in order to see it. And then you need to go and do an additional degree in understanding the data that it spits out. But it was actually quite useful at pointing out where in the compile time were things being slow. And I was particularly concerned because the initial sort of glance at it said that OLC Pixel, which is clearly probably the singular most fundamental type in Pixel Game Engine, happened to be the culprit of everything being slow. I need to do more analysis. I don't think that's the case, really. In my contrived example, that was the case. So, well, hopefully we'll be getting a new computer soon. I do put some of it down to the fact that my computer is quite old. But new computers are very expensive things. Anyway, we were talking about objects. So this is an object. Look, see, it's a tree. And we can see that it consists of 4 polygons up here, and that's what this is in this list. I can crudely, and this is what, remember, it's all hacked together very quickly. If we were to do an editor seriously, I want this to be more professional and look at it. We can crudely sort of change the scale of things. We can rotate them too, although I can't for the life of me remember what the key was to make them rotate. I've tried everything. I just can't seem to remember. It might even have to be in sort of that, is it? No, I can't remember. So there was a key to slightly put them on an angle as well. And we can see that that was actually used on these things. So I created one of these things. These are foreground objects, I think, yeah. Foreground objects. They're actually all the same thing, except sometimes they're flipped and sometimes they're rotated. The bounding rectangle is always axis aligned. And we'll come back to that at the end. So the objects, yeah, if we wanted to create a new object, we select an object layer. So let's try here. And all we had to do straight away was, I think, just start drawing something. So again, it's just like drawing the background, and that becomes a new object. And if I select that object and choose a different color just to prove a point and start drawing something else, that becomes, I believe, yeah, a property of that object. So these are now 2 things that are grouped together and they're sorted in the Z order. So it'll always draw polygon 0 first and polygon 1 last, and that's why I've got these forward and backwards things. So if I can send polygon 1 to the back, you can see it changed its order. But what I'm proud of here is that it's all live, it's real time, it's happening in this game engine, and I just really like that. I think that's how game engines should work. The editor should really be built into it. Excuse me. It's almost a 386. It's not far off. Do you know my first computer was a 286? Had a lock and a turbo button on the front. Conflicting philosophies, compile time voodoo. Yeah, I think templates, they're I don't know. Do you know what? I sort of jumped on the bandwagon for a couple of years not so long ago. I'm becoming less inclined to start using them, and not just because of compile times. I don't think we've fully mastered reporting template errors very well. I think it's usually once you know what you're doing and you can look at the error, you can kind of go, oh right, it's obvious I did something silly up there. But for somebody that's finding their feet with the language and the environment and then suddenly presenting them with an entirely template-based tool, if anything goes wrong, it's just immediately off-putting. I don't think it's that easy a problem to solve either. So yes, anyway, objects, that's what an object is. It allows me to just group some polygons together in a known way, and I can do things like copy and paste. So I can copy, and I should be able to paste there we go, paste the object. For some reason, I've got to have that mode selected, and that allows me to duplicate them as and how across the level. There were some last-minute hacks applied to the level editor, particularly regarding these sort of textured objects. So you may notice I don't have any facility for specifying the texture or loading or specifying coordinates or anything. I didn't have the time to build that in, even though we've done that earlier this year. So I just instead created special keys that deliberately do one thing and one thing only. So if I think, let me see what happens. If I press 1, yeah, 1 puts in one of these things, which restores health. I can pick it up and then position it wherever I needed to. 2 puts in one of those things. So these are hard-coded into the code. Load up a thing with this texture already. 3 puts in an enemy. And that's it. That's the only things I've got. There's nothing else. Now, why has everything got bounding rectangles? Well, some of you already know the answer to this, I know. But one of the interesting things is you'll see up here, maybe you can't on the stream, I can't make it very big, I'm afraid, how many shapes are drawn. Well, in this case, you can see the whole map, so far, 538 shapes. Now, those shapes consist of lots of different vertices, but it's the overall number of shapes. And every shape has its own bounding rectangle because the whole map and everything contained within it lives within a dynamic quad tree, which I've made videos about and released some code about. And that's a nice way of quickly finding what it is I need to draw. So if I zoom right in on this polygon, shapes drawn 4. Why is it 4 when there's just one polygon on the screen? Well, don't forget there's multiple layers. So it's drawing the background, it's drawing the foreground, it's drawing, in this case, it's also drawing the camera zone for the editor. And if I scroll everything off the screen, shapes drawn, none. It becomes a very efficient way to represent this world. Now, I quite like also working at this geometry level because I've got this sort of resolution-independent scaling. And I think I'm going to exploit that in a personal project I'm working on. I think I'm slowly getting to where I want to be in terms of the level tech. Once you've got a good geometry library that the community have created for you, things like collisions with all of these polygons and triangles become trivial. So that's enough of the editor. Let's go and have a look at the remaining bits of code that I think are interesting, or we'll see how far we get anyway. Excuse me, a little bit of a cough. You can see I've not done this for a while. I'm sort of out of touch. Oh, and I've cut my hair. Anybody noticed? It's all short. I know we retain our wisdom in our hair, us programmers. So I could potentially go and save that. I'm not going to, for obviously. I don't want to overwrite the level that I created. And that's it. It's just this static thing. And that's what's loaded in the world. Let's go and have a look, actually. Does Visual Studio... Here we go. So we'll just sort of nudge, Starfreak clone. Does Visual Studio... It does very good at loading the images. Annoyingly, when I'm going to make videos, that's going to be really frustrating because every time I move the cursor across the screen, I get all sorts of pop-ups and stuff now. Will it help me do this? So have I got any means of actually opening this file? No! Ugh. Dreadful. Dreadful. Let's go and have a look. Have I got it somewhere here? I just wanted to show what was in this world text. Exactly, Starfreak. Let me just open up a little Explorer window and find this path. Where am I working? What am I doing? E drive, that's it. Oh, E drive. Work. No, it's not, is it? I don't actually work there anymore. Where am I going? One encoder. Not that one. Thank you, OneDrive. One encoder. Here we go. You can see I've been working so much recently in Pixel Game Engine 3 and everything else. I've already forgotten where I store all of this stuff. Code. There we go. Pixel Game Engine Dev. Jams. Oh, it's not even in there. Where am I? Where is this? Open containing folder. Okay, good. Oh dear. Right, okay, so what I'm going to do is drag in the world.txt file, and this is it. And this uses, believe it or not, OLC data file as a type. Right? It's just the whole world is stored as this. And we can see that when we serialize the layers, here they are, layer, what the background was, what its alpha is, how many shapes are on it, and these are the shapes. And there can be quite a few of them. So there's different types of shape which depend on the different types of geometry that's being used to construct them. And these are the vertices. So let's go and find something. So these ones all look like quads and things. So these are probably all the rectangles used in the background. Where's my fancy... Why do I not get my code exploring thing? Where's that gone? This is quite a large file. Ah, here we go. So this is more complicated geometry. Let's just zoom out a little bit there. So these are all the different mountains and different shapes and things. And all of this is parsed from text right at startup. So, you know, the OLC data file is no slouch. And the Inscripton build is also no slouch at parsing all of this text into geometry and loading the game. All happens straight away. If we get to the bottom, I think we're into it, sort of the territory. These final layers are worth things. So we've got objects here. It's just where are they and what's the texture on them. So I think these were split up into the vertex position. That looks like the RGB, and these were the texture coordinates if applicable to that particular vertex. Probably the only benefit of going over JSON files is I just prefer the look and visibility of the data in these things. I find JSON's great. I use JSON. You know, commercially I use JSON, but they're a bit clumsy. in terms of just being able to look at the raw file. I wanted something that was very human editable, but also quickly parsable, and this is my file format. There's the whole video on my file format that I use, and I use it for a lot of things. I know quite a few people do too. It is a simple data format, and it works. It's very easy to interact with, and that's quite useful. We'll go and have a look at where that might be. Pixel, where have I put world? Where did world end up? This one? No, not that one. I think we're going to have to split this into a two-part CodeZone stream, sort of reviewing this. Where is world? Am I blindly missing something obvious here? Game mode, intro, gameplay, game. I'm sure it was in game structs. Oh, well, what we can do is go to our main asset thing here, and we'll go and use some Visual Studio magic to go find where that is. Go to definition. So the world itself. What file was this in? Game structs. Oh, it wasn't there. We just didn't go down enough. Right? It's a combination of me doing code in header files, which you shouldn't do. Well, you've missed a fair bit here, Dragonite, because we've been talking about the editor I made as part of my Jam engine, and it's not the editor that I want to release as being the thing. It's just it was a nice opportunity to do a better prototype. For those interested in the data file, so this was my world class. And I want to save the file. You create an object of the type data file, and then you just specify what it is. Set int in this case, and that's it. It goes away. It just magically goes and constructs everything behind the scenes. It's not as sophisticated as JSON. It's not compatible with JSON. It's not, but it's just I find it easy, and it allows me to do things like loops through stuff quite trivially as well. All of these set strings, it doesn't matter if you get them wrong. It's kind of self-healing in a way. It works quite nicely. So here, if you want to set multiple things on a line, you just specify an index at the same time, and that's what gave us the vertex. So this is index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, for example, attributed to that object. And reading it in, so there's quite a lot of stuff to save. So I've got the world, the layer counts, the shape counts, the number of vertices per shape, the number of objects. This is vertex object in this case, and yeah, there's again iterating through all the worlds, and then when we're doing it the other way around, you just read it, right? You read in the data file up here, and you go and get the integers, the strings, all the real numbers that you want to get out of it. And if they don't exist, nothing crashes on you, nothing goes. It just sort of fails gracefully, so it'll return zeros or things that you specify. You can also have one of the things that I quite like about my file format is you can have comments in here as well, which of course are ignored by the parser. So rather than having to create some special object as a comment, you just have comments. Quite nice. So I think we're out of time tonight. That's gone really quick, and I think this is probably worth perhaps a follow-up. Maybe next week's is continuing with this particular sort of analysis of the code, because we've not really got stuck into the game. We got stuck into the editor, and there's still stuff about the game I'd like to talk about, and how it was implemented, and how we went about using the new GUI libraries that we've been working on for most of the summer to create that GUI. Right. What format would it take to format decimal numbers with shorthand expression into the data file? Printf. Yeah, I don't know what. Yeah, probably could sort of truncate it to something a bit more useful. Of course, if you type it in by hand, which was one of the ways I was constructing the files, that was the way to do it. Yeah, sorry, Dragoneye. You missed out. Yeah, so a lot of tools have come together to work for this. So we're using the camera tool. I'm using the PGE3 extension, which is not public domain yet. I'm using the GUI extension, which is not public domain yet. I'm using the interpolations header, which probably could be public domain. I don't know why it's not. I'm using the GUI library, we have just mentioned. I'm using the Geometry 2D library, which is community constructed. And I'm using almost all of these in the vanilla form. There were some problems getting all of these libraries to talk to each other, and the most recent release of PGE2 in the repo, which was only a couple of weeks ago, tried to sort all those out. So you should be able to now include, I think, a lot of these in any order, and they're all sort of capable of transmitting information to each other to stop redefining of objects. One of the biggest changes to the PG2 header file was and it might not actually be in here. Let me have a look. This is no longer my most recent sort of code area. So I wouldn't be surprised if this doesn't necessarily work very well. If I go to Pixel Game Engine 2.29, can't remember. You may have noticed now there's been a big change to the top of the header file. And that specifically was the implementation of Vector 2D. So one thing I never anticipated when I created the Pixel Game Engine is just how important the Vector 2D class would be to how the engine moves going forwards. So it was all, because there was a video about how it was constructed, of course, where it was neatly packed into about 20 lines. Do you know what? I've given up trying to make the header file really succinct, and I've just sort of exploded it here with this 2D type. This is technically the PG3 2D vector type, and it's very similar. It's a lot more consistent, and it uses a lot more sort of modern bits and pieces in here, which might cause problems for older compilers, but we've all got to move on somewhere. But it does allow you to have sort of mixed type vector maths behaving in a way which is consistent, which will solve one of the issues on the repo. And you've got more sort of options when it comes to casting and manipulating data between different vector types. So it's an improvement by far. But this is the same Vector 2D class that's used across all of these libraries now. So if any one of them defines it, they all know that it already exists in that particular translation unit, and it should all talk to each other. Right. Thank you, Gusco. Yeah, okay. I was trying to make a JSON, but I don't get this. Do you have easing functions? I do have easing functions. In fact, we had a stream about it. There's this interpolations function where we start to animate all of the polygons. So there's quite a lot of animation stuff behind the scenes. Everything we've seen today is static. Anyway, that's going to have to be for another time. So thank you all very much for tonight. Thank you for somebody threw some bits at me. Don't know if that's rude or not. Is that rude? Anyway, everybody, take care.